Good day. How are you, man?
I'm better now. Always so good to see you.
It's always good to see you, man, and to hear that strong resonance in your voice and that power packed dynamic that you carry. It's always good to hang out with you. And so,
Thank you.
right before you came on, I was about to let people know who you were that don't. So I want people to understand that Sean Stevenson is the author of the USA Today national bestseller, Eat Smarter, and the international book-selling book, Sleep Smarter. His latest book is Eat Smarter. We're going to get into that. He's the creator of the Model Health Show, featured as the #1 health podcast in the U.S. with millions of listeners, downloads every single year. Co-founder of Advanced Integrative Health Alliance, featured in Forbes, Fast Company, New York Times, Muscle and Fitness, ABC News, ESPN, many other major media outlets. And he's been with me before. And so I thought for such a time as this, when, people are so concerned about their health, people they have contracted the virus of fear and the virus of anxiety and the virus of worry regarding the toxic environment we live in, the toxic food, uh, fear of viruses and things of that particular nature. I thought it'd be good to have you on the program, particularly since you just released this book, Eat Smarter, and it's all over the place. You went to #1 in how short period of time?
The first week, #1 new release in America. Crazy. Crazy.
But you know what? You have prepared yourself for this for so long.
Yeah.
One, you have a personal testimony of how you healed your own body. And then two, you prepared yourself in terms of your spiritual discipline and your visioning and your depth of research. So success like this doesn't just happen. There's a lot of work behind the scene that allows for this to take place. So for any individuals who don't know who you are, can you give me a recap of your own healing of your own body temple and what you were diagnosed with?
Absolutely. And many of these principles, like you just said, I really picked up from you. I was able to articulate things that I'd experienced that I hadn't been able to put into words and to share with others. And so you are such an inspiration. I know everybody here feels the same way. But that said, for me, I came much the same kind of circumstances as a lot of other people from where I'm from, which is my way out is going to be through sports or the drug game. That's really all I saw in my environment. My heroes, in a sense, or the people that were my role models, were the guys who had the nice car. At least, we're not in very good circumstance. They got a nice car, but they were in that game. Or, they were betting on a few of us to make it out by playing sports. And so everything was looking so good for me. I went to one of the top high schools in the country that just churns out professional athletes. And when I was 15 years old, sophomore, I ran a 4.5 40, which is like NFL combine,
Right.
And I've got so many game films that just, all like a highlight reel, scoring touchdowns. But it was also when I was 15 that at track practice, doing a 200-meter sprint, I broke my hip. And my hip broke just from running. There was no trauma. Nobody hit me. I didn't fall. My body was beginning to break down from the inside. And I didn't realize this yet. And I went through what's called standard of care, which is, give me some NSAIDs, stay off the leg, and you get better. But nobody stopped to ask, how did a 15-year-old kid, break his hip? When you think of somebody breaking their hip, it's usually relegated to somebody much older. And
Right.
It wasn't until, and by the way, I don't know if I shared this before, Rap, but I've got game films, as I just mentioned, just popped in my head. I've broken away, 38 sweep, 5 yards from the end zone, past the defensive back, and I just fall. I collapse because another muscle tore or some kind of injury happened. I got it on film. I suffered about 6 more injuries that just absolutely annihilated my visions of like making it through sports. And it wasn't until I was 20 years old I finally get this diagnosis of degenerative disc disease and a rapidly deteriorating bone density. And at the time, I was just, first of all, I was glad to know that something was happening. You know, it's good to figure out like, oh, there is something off here. I'm not just in my head. But the issue was something called the nocebo effect. All right. My physician at the time, even though he meant well, he put my MRI up for me to see, and he told me that I had the spine of an 80-year-old man. And when I asked, what can I do about this? Because I was glad to know, he told me that there's nothing you can do. This is something that just happens, and I'm sorry. Right?
Mm.
He said,
Something just happens. It just happens.
I rephrased the question, and he said that this is incurable, and I'm sorry, son, we're going to get you some medication and we're going to get you a back brace, but this is something you're going to have to live with. And what the injunction is called the nocebo effect. And I just posted this actually on my Instagram. If people want to pop over, I think it's maybe 3 posts ago, about one of the physicians who was interviewed on one of the top news shows here in Los Angeles, telling folks that these were his exact words, and it's on, it's on my post, and you can listen to him say it. If you step outside your door with this new strain of the virus, you are putting yourself in front of a firing squad.
Right.
All right. A firing squad means imminent death.
Right.
All right. And these words implanted into people from an authority figure, placebos, Rev, placebos. Right. You know the power of the placebo. Placebos, fake drugs, fake surgery, fake treatments, they're 33% effective on average in clinical trials. So someone just believing they're taking something that's going to normalize their blood sugar or reduce their blood pressure or even kill their cancer cells, on average, they're 33% effective. There's massive data on this. Our minds are the most powerful pharmacy in the known universe. What's different about our minds and drugs is that it's not bioidentical. It's literally made for you, for your receptor sites. A nocebo is getting a negative injunction that something bad is going to happen. And that's what happened to me. Long story short, spiraled downward. My health gained about 30, 35 more pounds over the course of 2 years, eating what I affectionately call the tough diet or typical university food. And everything changed. Obviously, I'm standing here today, but everything changed when I realized that I've been outsourcing my potential. I've been outsourcing my health and habitually asking this very disempowering question, why me? Why me? Why won't somebody help me? And when everything changed after I saw my 4th physician, and I realized that even though he meant well, he didn't walk in my shoes. And I finally asked, it took me 2 years. I asked, what can I do to get better? And Rev, I started to see things that were already there that I couldn't see because I had blinders on. And I got better so quickly. 9 months later, I got a scan done, completely reversed the degeneration. My 2 herniated disc had healed and retracted on their own. I began working as a strength conditioning coach, became a nutritionist, through all my college training and all that good stuff over in the clinical practice. Wrote the books. My friend is Michael Beckwith now. off from the darkness, comes the light.
Yeah, but you said something very important. You said you began to ask an empowering question. How can I help myself? How can I heal? Rather than taking the authority figure. Sometimes I call MDs minor deities because, as you said, they have a voice of authority that can actually change the course of somebody's healing process by what they say. And what he said to you was, you're going to live with this for the rest of your life. There's nothing we can do about it. These things just happen. Here's some pharmaceutical drugs to alleviate the pain and a back brace. Do the best you can. And when you change that question, to what can I do to help myself, the paradigm blindness dissolved and you could see other possibilities. And so many people live under the aegis of paradigm blindness. They can't see outside of their own current perception. But when you ask a question like that, you start to go outside of your present perception and the perception of others. Possibilities loom large. And here you are today, assisting people in coming back to health, assisting people in strengthening their resolve about so much. And as I said, particularly at such a time as this, and I think it's very valuable that your book comes out now, when people are worried and concerned and they're concerned about their families and everything on the news is a nocebo effect. You turn on the news and you're going to be inundated with the virus and the people that's possibly dying from it, and people's immune system are being compromised by merely looking at the news and going down that dark tunnel. And so I'm not really surprised that your book goes to #1, you know, because people are looking for something. So before we get into specifics about the book, you know, what is the overarching message you're giving people in Eat Smarter?
Yeah. You know what? You just said something. There's nothing more powerful than an idea whose time has come.
Right.
And it's just this balancing effect of what's happening in the world. So many things happen behind the scenes that made the book come out at this time. It wasn't my intention for it to come out at this time. I was fighting for it to be another time, but it came at the moment that it's most needed. And there's been so many different things. Again, like this is on the top 10 list. Barack Obama is on the list, Matthew McConaughey, and me. It doesn't
Sean
make
Stevenson.
sense. It doesn't make sense on paper, but this message, and it just, I don't care about the fanfare and politics and, you know, celebrity. People are interested in health, but they're not hearing about what health really is. It's a focus on disease, which the system that
I need you to
we
repeat
exist
that.
in.
You need to repeat that because that's important. People are focusing on disease, but they're not focusing on health.
Yeah, like this is when I initially went to college. I shared this with you. I had never met anybody in my life that I knew personally, besides maybe my teachers that went to college or graduated from college. I didn't know that that was a thing. And I went to a private university at a great pre-med track because of the Cosby Show. Like I was like, I should be a doctor. Like that looks good. He looks happy. But what I saw early on in life I love you say this statement that God doesn't call the qualified, God qualifies the called.
Right.
When you said that, I immediately went right back to that moment of decision when I was on that college campus and I was thrust out of that system. My first semester, it was an elective. It wasn't part of the pre-med track. I took a nutritional science class, but I thought it was about fitness. I thought the teacher was going to teach me how to be more fit. I didn't know there's a difference, also the nuance with fitness and health. My teacher was bordering on obesity, and he was going to teach us about health. And here's the thing, he was a brilliant person. He was a brilliant man. He wasn't secretly going and huffing down honey buns. He was doing what he thought was correct. He was doing what he was teaching, but he was blaming himself because we had the food pyramid, and at the bottom, 7 to 11 servings, whole grains. You got to get the whole. He was just, in his mind, he's like, I need to have more whole grains. I need more. I'm just not whole grained enough. I need to get browner. And he was not getting the results, but he couldn't get that feedback that maybe the system itself is wrong. And so I was turned off to the system. And the system, I'm bringing this up because my classmates were obsessed, and I saw it. We were being taught about illness. We were being taught about diagnosis. We were being inundated with the focus on disease. There was nothing about what creates health. Nothing about it. And it wasn't until, you know, fate, in a sense, had other plans for me. And years later, losing and figuring out, and this is something that you talk about, questions are the answer. And I've been habitually asking, and I talk about this in Eat Smarter because it's so important. There's a mental reflex. It's called instinctive elaboration. Instinctive elaboration. Our brains, it's a servo mechanism. It's like a heat-seeking missile. Whatever question is posed, whatever habitual thing we're asking ourselves, our minds are constantly scanning our internal and external environment to give us the answer. We're obsessed with it. It's why they dangle in front of our minds like the open loop at the end of the TV show. Like, I gotta see what happens. Your mind is doing this automatically. And so asking why me, I'm gonna find more reasons as to why my life, you know?
That's it.
But here's another thing. As we work on ourselves, even the negative questions become empowering. Because today when I ask myself why me, it's because I'm strong enough. It's because there's a capacity that I don't know I have yet that's working to be manifested, you know? So all of these parts, you know, kind of become imbued into the work. People ask me, how long did it take to write the book? Really, it took decades of my life experience. And that's the power of a book, is you could take decades and you can absorb it into days.
Yes.
you know, and the message is a virility to books as well. So I'm very, very proud of what's happening and happy about it. But I know that this is so much bigger than me.
Yeah, yeah. It's a beautiful read. I have my copy. It's a beautiful read. And since you were talking about your professor that was teaching about fitness or nutrition, but he was obese, you know, you have you're clearing up the calorie dogma in your book. You know, the 7 factors. So that was, he was probably unaware of that. You know, break that down a little bit.
This is so important. This is so important. On my very first day in my nutritional science class, Rev, I paid for this education. I paid him to teach me the wrong thing. I paid for this. And so the very first day I was taught that if you can manage calories, you can manage your body composition.
Right.
If you can manage calories, you can manage your health. This was really the tip of the spear. It was the monarch, it was the boss, it was the governing force for our metabolism in the management of calories. Now, just to share a little glimpse, here in the United States, we have over 200 million people who are overweight or obese. In my family, growing up, just say I have 40 close family members, 38 of them are obese. I come from this. I know what it's like. I know all the dynamics. They don't want to be obese. As a matter of fact, many of them were trying hard to lose weight and managing calories, doing Slim Fast, doing Jenny Craig, and it just didn't work. But we in the medical profession blame the person and not the system. And the system was inherently flawed because today, and what I'm really bringing forth and why another big reason I think Eat Smarter is just doing what it's doing now is that I'm bringing forward there's 7 what I call epicaloric controllers that is proven in the data. We have mountains of data on this. What that means is very similar to epigenetics, you know, and our mutual friend, Bruce Lipton.
Right.
Epicaloric means it's above caloric control. These factors control what calories do in your body, right? And there's 7 of them I've identified, and I'll share a couple of them with you guys here today, because these are the things that, just for example, we can have two patients. They can be on the exact same diet, exact same exercise program. They start off at the same height and same weight. And because of changes in these epicaloric controllers, one of them can burn over 100,000 calories more in a year than the other person, doing the exact same thing. So how is that even possible? One of them that I'll share right off the bat, because it's one of the biggest epidemics right now, is something called neuroinflammation. All right, neuroinflammation, brain inflammation.
Right.
These cookie cutter diet programs aren't talking about how inflammation in your brain can change your rate of calorie burn. And here's the overarching thing to understand with this. So your brain is literally governing and controlling. It can send a signal via your vagus nerve to your gut.
Yeah.
And they're constantly communicating. You know, the gut is often referred to as a second brain, about the nutrient density, the nutrient available in your stomach, the amount of calories you need for processes, and the amount of nutrients you need. And this data can get flawed. It can get discombobulated, and your brain can be telling your gut to turn up the absorption and to literally absorb more calories from your food, just based on a perception of data.
Right.
And why this matters is that neuroinflammation, and researchers at Yale University found that inflammation in the gut and in the brain can create disruption to this system and lead to the suppression of hundreds of calories a day for people. So this can like reduce their resting metabolic rate by hundreds of calories. And this is the last point with this is, in understanding neuroinflammation, your brain, like I said, is controlling what your metabolism is doing. It's kind of like a thermostat, all right? If we want to talk about your hypothalamus, and
Right.
it's regulating and keeping it at a certain temperature of calorie burn. And so if somebody starts messing with that thermostat and it gets too hot and it's creating this inflammation and driving the thermostat itself to get twisted and turned, again, somebody can be doing the most perfect calorie counting diet and wondering why they're not getting results. This is really the last point here. Number one thing seen in the data is that obesity, so what these researchers found, I mentioned Yale University School of Medicine, in neuroinflammation is a direct causative factor of obesity, and obesity is a direct causative factor of neuroinflammation. So this is a double-edged sword, and people get stuck in this vicious circle and not understanding that we have to address the inflammation in the brain to help to address what's happening with the metabolism. So that's just one of them. And
Well,
it's so much more dynamic.
let's start right there. So do you give people ways to deal with that inflammation in the brain?
Two things. I could give a ton, but let me give you two things right off the bat. All right, so ACH chemical. So it's a peer-reviewed study, one of the most prestigious journals. The research, and this was researchers out of Auburn University, and this is in the book as well. They discovered that oleocanthal-rich extra virgin olive oil, all right, extra virgin olive oil was able to reduce neuroinflammation, and not just that, it's able to repair the blood-brain barrier. This is the internal security system that's kind of protecting you against toxicity and toxins getting into the brain. Excessive, you know, basically, it's kind of like, I think of it like a toll booth, all right?
Right.
And your brain only allows certain things into it. And when the blood-brain barrier gets damaged, it's allowing things into the brain that should be there, creating more inflammation.
Right.
Olive oil was found to heal the blood-brain barrier and reduce neuroinflammation. So this isn't just, and I'm not necessarily like everybody should have olive oil. The data exists, and it's so shocking.
You don't have stock in olive oil.
I don't have no stock. I need to get some stock.
This is just the research and what it shows. 'Cause I've seen a lot of research about extra virgin olive oil in terms of the reduction of women and the reduction of the women's ability to catch cancer, breast cancer. I've seen a lot of different studies about the efficacy of organic extra virgin olive oil. And now you're bringing, this one is new to me. I know about the other ones, but about eliminating the is it inflammation of the brain is what you're saying? Yeah.
That's right.
I mean, I take
Now,
olive oil.
You just brought up something really important. You know, this is the thing about health, is that something that's good for something that we're targeting is probably good for something else.
Right.
Because your body doesn't operate in a vacuum.
Right.
And this is the problem with allopathic medicine, is we're trying to treat, we'll just say we're targeting cholesterol, right? So we put somebody on a statin. What I saw in my clinical practice and what I would share with patients coming in is that we saw an increased incidence of diabetes for folks taking a statin, 30% increased incidence of developing diabetes. It's because it's not a side effect, it's a direct effect, because it's going to affect everything else. If you take something that's good for your eyes, it's probably going to help your joints. If you take something that's good for your heart or defending the body against cancer, it's probably going to help your brain, because it's all connected. And so, number one, the olive oil, that just jumped right to mind. What the researchers found was that 2 to 3 tablespoons a day. There's a lot of nuance with the olive oil, by the way, that we could just spend the whole time talking about. I'm not going to talk much more about it. But there's nuance in the sourcing. You don't want to get olive oil that's great for protecting your brain, that comes along with pesticides, herbicides, and rodenticides that's creating inflammation in the brain, right? So that's one. The other one that I want to share, and there's so many again, but I just think this one is so applicable, so simple. The brain itself, when we think about putting out a fire, Rev, what are we going to use? If something is actually on fire, what do we need to put that fire out?
You need water.
You need water, all right? Inflammation, even the word, is from a word derived from to set on fire. And the brain is 80% water. It's the most water dominant organ in our body next to our lungs. And in fact, one of the studies I share in the book, just a 2% drop in your body's baseline hydration level is enough to cause dramatic cognitive decline in the form of reduced reaction time, reduced ability to do basic operations like mental math and grammar. Basically, we get dumber just by being dehydrated, you know? And so helping to put the inflammation out. This is what is one of the biggest issues. Folks are just chronically dehydrated as well. It's giving the brain what it actually is made of. And that water helps for, number one, to kind of help to flush out metabolic waste products, which Alzheimer's, which is creeping into the top 5 leading causes of death. And people are not talking about this. It is a devastating illness. We think about it in relationship to losing memories. You can literally lose your ability to chew. You forget how to swallow. And so it's skyrocketing right now. One of the biggest tenets, we've got a couple that we see with Alzheimer's: insulin resistance in the brain, inflammation in the brain, and an inability of the brain to clean itself. Water is one of the most important things for literally flushing out metabolic waste. So 2 things to help reduce inflammation. And again, I got a whole list of them.
Yeah, well, that's why we want people. That's why I have you on here, because I want people to get your book. You know, so that you're covering just a small taste of what's in the book, but everything you're saying is just so powerful. I mean, just going back to the obesity again, isn't obesity the second rate of how people are dying, mortality? Isn't heart attack first, obesity second?
So obesity is it's the world of coding is very, very overly complex in our culture, because obesity is tied to 400,000 deaths a year here in the United States. Right. But getting its own kind of category is complicated in coding. And I'm bringing this point up.
And that's every year.
Every year. And I'm bringing this point up because here in the United States, heart disease is the #1 cause of death every year. Cancer is #2. The 3rd leading cause of death is something called iatrogenesis. All right, iatrogenesis meaning physician created. Medical error is the 3rd leading cause of death in the United States. Right. But it's people don't hear about this because of the complexity in coding. By the way, if anybody wants to look this up, Johns Hopkins, just Google Johns Hopkins 3rd leading cause of death. It's unfortunate, but we cannot make it better if we don't talk about this. You know, and a big problem, a big reason behind that is the treatment of symptoms and not addressing the root causes of diseases. And I would argue that it's the #1 cause of death because it's not sufficiently treating the #1 and #2 causes of death. They keep getting worse. Even though 70% of our citizens are already on drugs, it's not making anything better. Everything keeps getting exponentially worse.
People need to hear that. They need to hear that statistic again. 70% of Americans are on some kind of pharmaceutical drugs that for the most part aren't enhancing the quality of their life. Is that correct?
Unfortunately. And this is the thing too, everything has its place, but we've seen consistently over, and people have no idea about the thousands of drugs that are pulled off the market because they keep killing people, you know, and drug companies, these are publicly traded entities. Their job is not about protecting you. It's about making money for the shareholders. And it takes so much for a drug to get pulled off the market. It's not even innocent until proven guilty. It can be guilty. It's until it has killed enough people that it starts to cut into the pockets sufficiently, you know, unfortunately. But I don't want to make this all about that side of things. I don't want to make it all about,
but I want to give people a perspective, because we have a heart attack, heart issues, #1. You have cancer, #2. You have physician enhanced death, #3. Where does the COVID virus come in? Because it's all the rage right now, but it's not even #1.
All right, Rev, this is getting into it. Let's share this, because again, unfortunately, the framing, we're provided so much data from the news without context, right? Cases without context, diagnosis without context. And so we don't know what a lot of stuff means, but we're just scared. And so this is what I want folks to know. And this is directly from the CDC. And I was talking about this, you know, when I was looking at the data coming out of Italy months ago, and I saw what was happening, and I was like, we're going to be in trouble here in the US if we don't get it together. So the CDC published a study. This was in September, after compiling all the data. They uncovered that 94% of the folks who've lost their lives in association with this virus had an average of 2.6 pre-existing chronic diseases and or comorbidities. All right. On average, 94% had an average of 2.6 diseases. That's almost 3. Right. And we're not talking about the underlying susceptibility, because what the news will do is frame the 6%. Well, 6% were perfectly healthy. Are you kidding me? Like, again, it's just that those are the stories that you can sensationalize. We're not addressing the underlying susceptibility of our citizens. And what happens, okay, so COVID, it's known to have a tropism towards the lungs, right? So it's a chronic inflammatory disease of the lungs. What if we get a pre-inflamed individual who already has inflamed lungs, who already has systemic inflammation, neuroinflammation, and then you add this on top of it? What do you think is going to happen? Yeah. But we haven't addressed a single time, not one task force member, not one well, I'm in doing the media now, so I'm in there. I'm saying this stuff now, but we're not getting anybody that's talking to our citizens and saying, listen, we need to get our citizens healthier and increase our resilience so that we're more robust and healthy. Because what's also not talked about in the context was even prior to the zines, you know, the vax, even prior to that, we had about 90 million confirmed cases worldwide. 90 million, Rev. Now listen to this. What I do is I'll go talk to the top epidemiologist. I'll bring him forward so everybody can hear from him. And many of them have shared with me, whenever we have a confirmed number of cases, automatically any epidemiologist worth their salt knows that there's 10 to 15 times more cases at least in the population. So if we've got 90 million confirmed cases, you multiply that times 10, times 15, we've got 1 billion people. It's no longer pandemic, it's endemic. It's integrated itself into the human population. And the reason I'm bringing this point up is this. When you hear this number, you don't hear about the 1 billion people who are okay, who've contracted the virus. You don't hear about that. Not to say that this isn't a virulent, dangerous issue we're dealing with. There's no context. It's all bad news. We're not getting the news about how a human body can actually be okay. And what does that actually look like? You know, so that's where the work really is like focusing on how can we make our citizens healthier, our communities healthier, because this is not the last thing, Rev. There's already, it's a new mutation, you know, and it's going to keep happening until we get healthier.
As you've been teaching, viruses have been with us for thousands of years, and they mutate all the time. You know, they're always mutating. And would it be proper to say that an individual did not die from COVID, they died with COVID? Since there were other comorbidities, so they didn't die from it, they died with it.
This gets into the world of coding. And so I have so many wonderful people who do work in coding and coding deaths, and them sharing with me that they're seeing a way, they're being told to do things that they've never been told to do before. And it's just kind of muddying up the waters. Not to say, again, that this isn't a big issue, but there's not.
Issue. We're not saying it's not an issue at all.
Yeah.
But the context is important.
Yes, and those underlying susceptibilities, when you see something so clearly that is taking advantage of a weakened immune system in an individual, we're not talking about the fact that their immune system was already weakened. And what are the culprits behind that? That doesn't get the emphasis in the data. It's just COVID, that's it. And that's the problem. It's without context. And if we could point to, okay, we've got these underlying issues. And by the way, the top 3 comorbidities, hypertension, obesity, and type 2 diabetes. These are the 3 biggest comorbidities or additional cause of death that the CDC reported. And by the way, oh, wait a minute. Let me make this clear. Let me make this very clear. Those are the top 3 pre-existing conditions. Comorbidities. No, and again, anybody can go look this study up from the CDC. This is from the CDC. The top comorbidity is actually influenza. Influenza/pneumonia. But you don't hear about flu disappeared. Flu disappeared. Working in the clinical practice, I have an association with death. You know, I've seen, this is what makes me ask questions and go into these different areas and looking at the data. Most folks don't really realize, and I've been talking about this for years, the WHO, that's where a lot of attention was pointed in the beginning, you can just go to their site. About 700,000 people die every year from influenza. And it's as if it doesn't happen. No, it's never gotten any marketing campaign. Nobody's ever, and we have vaccines for it. It's been decades, but people keep dying. And by the way, let me be clear. That's just from the respiratory effects. That's just from the that's not, infection-related seizures and organ failure and all the other things. That's getting up over 1 million deaths a year as well. So it doesn't have that same kind of, but this is the thing. This condition all of a sudden is not important. It disappears, but it's still there. It's still a relevant thing. And the people that pass away, same thing. Around 90% have 1, 2, 3, or more pre-existing chronic diseases. We have to talk about and get our citizens healthier because these things are going to continue to happen if we don't do
Well,
something about it.
yeah, this goes back to your original point that no one is really talking about how to be healthy. They're talking about disease and pathology, but they're not talking about the conditions that need to be met for the body temple, for the immune system to be balanced and strong, for us to be healthy. No one's talking about that. I mean, I've heard no mandates about vitamin D. I've heard no mandates about vitamin C or zinc or systemic enzymes or this, you know, the leading Surgeon General and Dr. Fauci aren't necessarily speaking about how to stay healthy at all. And that should be a primary motivation of the work that they do, is to tell people how to stay healthy. And they do not do that. It's a disservice from the position that they are holding. So I appreciate you and people who are bringing out information. You know, you're doing it right now under the aegis of Eat Smarter, you know, and you're not pushing it. What I appreciate, he's not pushing a particular diet. I mean, I have my own diet that works for me. You know, you're not pushing a diet, but you're actually teaching people, you know, how to eat smarter to allow for the body temple to be in the proper condition to withstand the basic stuff of what we're going to run into. We're going to run into stuff all the time in this toxic environment. But the body's a genius. The body can heal anything under the right condition, with the right food, right nutrition, right hydration, right sleep, right prayer, right thinking. It can heal anything pretty much, you know.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
what I want to do is there's some more. I want to get some more information from you. I want to go into there was something that you said. I want to go into some more of the conditions. We've already gone about 44 minutes on the Instagram. So what I'm going to do is we're going to bring this to a close, and then I'm going to do a Zoom call with you and put part 2 on my app. And because you got all kinds of information here, man. I want to get into, you know, how what a nutrition deficiency looks like in the body, in the mind, in our relationships. I was looking through your book, you know, communities can be healthier. There's so much that people don't even think about when they're about to put that food in their mouth that's going to have a debilitating effect on so much of their life. And most people don't even know what good food is. I mean, listen, when you listen to your story, I remember you telling me you didn't even know what a vegetable was until you were in your 20s.
I didn't need a salad, Rev, and I shared this. I didn't need a salad until I was 25 years old. And like you said, Eat Smarter is a unifier, you know, regardless of the diet framework that you subscribe to. I want to make sure that you know the things that across the board will make that diet potentially damaging for you. You know, something that many people experience this. They do a diet program, it works for a year, then all of a sudden it stops working, and they start to blame themselves. They need to do it harder. They need to do the diet harder, the framework harder, and not realizing that diet framework might have stripped away a food source that's been for your ancestors for centuries. Maybe they were eating this particular food that was feeding a certain strain of bacteria that was protecting your gut against, leaky gut and breakdown, or protecting you against autoimmune disease that's leading to dysfunction and disease. And we need to add that food back in. So what I'm doing is just giving people permission to understand how their body works. We take them behind the scene and actually walk them through, this is how your body actually burns fat. How does it happen? Where does it go? We're demystifying all these things. And last thing is, you know, looking at how food influences, and all the data is just going to blow people's minds, how food affects our ability to have patience and the perspective take, to have empathy, and even our proclivity towards violence. And this is going to be really shocking for a lot of people and sobering, because I know a lot of people even listening right now, they're like, why is there so much fighting? Why is nobody listening to each other? This is just logical. But truly, we are the sickest nation in the history of the world. Self-inflicted. You know, I mentioned 200 million folks right now overweight or obese. 43% of folks are clinically obese. We're on our way within the next couple of years to be 50%. 135 million Americans are type 2 diabetic or pre-diabetic right now. I can go on and on and on at the poor state.
Well, I'm gonna have you go on a little. I'm gonna have you go on the Zoom call, and then I'll place it on my app that people can. You know, if you don't have that, many of you do. You just go to michaelbeckwith.com, and it'll tell you how to get the app right there. And then in the next day or so, you'll see part 2 of my interview with Sean Stevenson. Sean Stevenson's book is called Eat Smarter. It's in Target all over the place. And where else? Amazon?
It's Target, Barnes & Noble. Amazon is sold out. It should be back in stock in the next couple of days at Amazon, but you can find it at barnesandnoble.com, Target, and independent bookstores as well.
Very good. So that's Sean Stevenson. Eat Smarter is the book. Part 2, we're going to cover some other material as well. I want to get into gut health. I want to get what you think about vaccination. I want to get into, you know, just more about the food stuff. And people really need to do this, as I say right now, for such a time as this. So, Brother Sean, I'll talk to you soon. And
all right,
then,
thank you, Rev.
If you want another awesome video in our Black Excellence series, check out the video right there next to me. I think you'll enjoy it. Continue to believe, and I'll see you there.